Now, the winter season is crucial, of course, for the country's agricultural sector because that's when the wheat production takes place. Chief Agricultural Economist Wandile Sihlobo joining us this morning, taking a look at two big things, Wandile, good morning to you, that are going to affect this year's crop, I imagine. One is the ongoing blackouts, the other is the weak rand. Let's start with the weak rand, weaker as a result of the comments by the US ambassador. How damaging has it been? Good morning.
Good morning, Garrett. I think, Garrett, what has assisted us at this point is because we have already imported some of the material that we need for planting. For example, as a country, we import about 80% of the fertilizer that we use a year, 98% of agrochemicals, and a range of other farm inputs. And I think since we started planting in around about mid-April, much of that was already on the South African shores. But of course, I can say the point that if you look globally, farming inputs in general, the fertilizers and agrochemicals, they are down by roughly 30% from where they were a year ago. But because of a relatively weaker rand, we didn't benefit fully on those declines. We see our prices down by somewhere 15–10%, depending on a product by product. So on that side, I think we are better since much of our farming inputs that we need for the winter season had already landed on our shores, and indeed some farmers have procured them.
Yeah, we'll go product by product in just a few moments from now. I want to get your sense then on the power security, which is always an issue. There's this concern now that as we speak, stage 4 blackouts, stage 6 again from 4 p.m. this afternoon. Now there's talk, isn't there? We could be going to stage 16 as well if they change the stages. Just how worrying is this to someone in your sector?
Energy is always very important for agriculture, and of course we speak now about the winter crops. If you were to take a step back and look at the farming sector in general and say how much of the farming income that is generated in the fields that are under irrigation, roughly a third of our farming income is generated from such fields. But of course, if you consider what's happening in the poultry, dairy, the livestock industry, the number gets to much better than that. In the winter season, about half of our wheat is under irrigation, and of course, a great deal of the other commodities that we produce, barley, oats, canola. But of course, I think what is assisting us so far is the fact that there's been what we call the load curtailment to assist the farmers to a certain extent. And in areas where it was possible, I think Eskom is trying to see if they can reschedule load shedding so that farmers at least can have energy during the irrigation time, which is largely in the evenings. Those are all of the things that are being worked on by what we call the Agriculture Energy Task Team, which is led by Minister Diteza and the colleagues at Eskom. And I think, though, Garrett, the other things that is worth emphasizing in this conversation is that last week there was a budget vote speech by the Department of Agriculture, and they talked about what they call the Agro Energy Fund, which they expect to roll it out in a sector and assist some of the farmers that are thinking about creating their own generation. Those are all interventions that are appreciated, but of course, I think your central point remains that we view energy as always as a downside risk when we think about agriculture, even though there's a number of things that are being put in place in the meantime to ensure that we continue with our production. But this is something that we're monitoring given our dependence in energy supplies as the sector.
And just as we start saying goodbye this morning, so we've got the two issues. You've got the rand versus the US dollar. You've got the electricity crisis and the electricity issue as well. What's the takeaway for consumers here? Do we get a sense that the cost of food, the cost of grain, the cost of a loaf of bread, for example, as I say goodbye to you, is going to be going up exponentially? How concerned are you?
I'll close with that, Garrett, to say, as South Africa, we have been reasonably blessed to have a fairly good agriculture season. If you think about our summer crops, vegetables, and some fruit, to an extent that over the foreseeable future, I still think that our food supplies will remain intact. We see food price inflation this year moderating around 8%. which is slightly better than last year, where it was at 9.5%. So these are key risks of energy, but over this foreseeable future, I think things are better. We do worry consistently, of course, by the food processors, which have to deal with some of these energy issues. But I think all put together, the environment is still slightly better than what we've seen last year in as far as the rate of food price increases and, of course, the supplies.
Yeah, Wandile's crystal ball. Hopefully it's what's going to play out this year as well. Hopefully it's exactly as you say, Wandile. Thank you very much indeed. Agba's chief economist joining us this morning from Pretoria, Wandile Sihlobo. Good news, bad news, a bit of a mixed bag, but hopefully we can stay steady. We can maintain our figures as far as grain prices are concerned here in South Africa.